This is Carlton Johnson. He was born with a serious but treatable birth defect. But his mother says a team of doctors recommended against treatment. And just 4 days after he was born, Carlton Johnson was transferred to an institution without the benefit of surgery to let nature take its course.
They expect him to die in a very short period of time.
Carlton is not an isolated case. In hospitals around the country, doctors and parents are deciding against life-saving treatment, even routine medical care, for certain infants with physical or suspected mental handicaps. Consequently, each year, hundreds, if not thousands of newborns who might otherwise live with disabilities are allowed to die. The practice is widespread, but the public rarely hears about it, mainly because of doctor-patient confidentiality laws and fear of litigation. But when the courts do become involved, what was once secret and private becomes front-page news.
You bring people to a hospital when they're sick to get well. You don't bring them there to be starved to death. It died here.
At a hospital in Bloomington, Indiana, a child born with Down syndrome, a cause of mental retardation, is deliberately denied medical treatment, even food and water. The doctors and parents are taken to court, but too late. Baby Doe dies after 6 days. That was in 1982.
They have no business interfering with the medical decisions of parents, concerned parents and loving parents.
Nobody has the right to deny that life.
Just 4 months ago, in Stony Brook, New York, a baby girl was born with spina bifida, an exposed spine, which, if left untreated, usually results in infection and death. Because of the possibility of other handicaps, all treatment was suspended. A court battle over the fate of baby Jane Doe erupts and continues today.
Say bye-bye. Say bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Like baby Jane Doe, Carlton Johnson was born with spina bifida, a birth defect which nearly always produces paralysis in the lower parts of the body, and in a small percentage of cases, some mental retardation. Standard treatment for spina bifida includes closure of the spine, large doses of antibiotics to ward off deadly infection, and if necessary, the implantation of a shunt or thin tube under the skin to prevent a buildup of fluids around the brain. Experts in the field say with that kind of treatment, victims of spina bifida usually have a better than 80% chance of survival.
These children are born not dying. These children are likely to have a significant handicap. Like a handicap, however, which is compatible with independent competitive existence.
But in Carlton Johnson's case, his mother says a team of doctors from Oklahoma Children's Hospital recommended that his birth defect not be treated, either surgically or with medication. There was no need for these treatments, his mother was told, because Carlton had no chance of surviving beyond a year.
What did they tell you his chances were?
Well, not very good. They said like 6 months to a year. And the only thing they told me was about a shunt. And then, you know, after they told me about 6 months, that he would live 6 months without it. And then with it a year, and I just figured, what's the sense? And he already suffering, so why should he suffer anymore?
That was just hours after Carlton's birth. 4 days later, he was transferred to the Oklahoma Children's Shelter, a federally subsidized intermediate care facility for handicapped children. At the time CNN cameras arrived, Carlton had lived there for 17 months. Medical records obtained by CNN show he received antibiotics for an ear infection and was hospitalized for dehydration and examinations. His head, near normal size at birth, became swollen with fluids, a condition known as hydrocephalus, which can cause irreparable brain damage. This is the back of a child whose spine was surgically closed. Carlton Johnson's untreated back hosted a membrane-thin sac containing about a quart of spinal fluid. It was about the size of a walnut when he was born.
The meningeal cell's leaking, which we're afraid that it might rupture.
If it does rupture, what happens?
Infection and eventually death, if they're not able to successfully treat it. Then at that stage it would be crisis management and not just supportive care.
George McCormick, director of nursing at the shelter, says he spent months trying to persuade physicians to operate on Carlton.
Sometimes I was just ignored. They moved on to other subjects. So
They weren't very anxious, you're telling me, then to do anything at all.
no, they weren't anxious. They haven't been anxious to do or act in the behalf of any of these children. You prodded them, and essentially you didn't let them forget.
McCormick secured Mrs. Johnson's consent for an operation last October. That same month, medical records show, doctors agreed to perform the surgery. But when CNN went to the shelter 4 months later, Carlton still had not received an operation. Can surgery be performed safely after such a delay?
Is it possible to operate on him? The answer is yes. Is it an extremely risky operation now with an extremely high morbidity and mortality? And the answer is yes.
Dr. Shurtleff is the chief of pediatrics at Seattle's Children's Hospital and a national expert in the field of spina bifida. CNN asked him to view a videotape, study the medical records that we had obtained.
Is that good medicine? And would you have done that? Again, based on...
My answer is no. We would have followed the child. We would have provided it with acute illness care. We would have immunized the child, and we would have provided him with relief of pain. And by serial assessments, I'm sure that we would have ended up operating on that child to close the back and to put a spinal fluid shunt in.
Dr. David McClone, chief of pediatrics at Chicago's Children's Hospital, is also highly critical of non-treatment programs.
To watch the child develop a cosmetically unacceptable head and endanger the developing brain because of increased intracranial pressure is bad medicine. I just don't think that that's what is acceptable.
Repeated requests for interviews with a team of doctors were denied, and CNN cameras were even barred from Oklahoma Children's Hospital. Later, after additional telegram requests, the hospital relented somewhat and allowed us to talk to the chief of pediatrics, Dr. J. Andy Sullivan. With the hospital's own cameras taping our interview, Dr. Sullivan denied any physicians there would hold life-saving treatment.
We don't have any non-treatment regimen. We have some patients that receive nurturing or less aggressive surgical management.
And despite an official hospital release form where the attending physician recommended children be transferred to the shelter, Dr. Sullivan denied any such practice exists, or that he himself has treated any patients at the shelter.
You're trying to tell me, doctor, that the team at this hospital does not recommend sending these children to the shelter when the decision has been made not to treat?
There's not a recommendation to send these children anywhere. They're discharged to the care of their parents.
But have you dealt with any children who have been referred or released to the children's shelter?
I don't recall being involved with any children that were discharged and their families elected to place them in the shelter.
But according to medical records obtained by CNN, it was Dr. Sullivan who conducted an evaluation of Carlton Johnson at the shelter last September. What were his conclusions then? No further treatment or evaluation recommendations are made at this time. This child is not a candidate for an active rehabilitation program.
What you have just done is read something to me that you would allude to me. I would assume if you do that, that you are violating, by exposing his medical record, some relationship that I have with that patient. And I do not have his record. I was not advised before this that you wish to discuss this patient. And I don't feel it would be appropriate to discuss a specific patient in front of the nation.
This is a statement signed by his mother releasing all the information and allowing anyone to talk to us about. Maybe if you'd like to look at that.
I'd prefer not to look at it. I don't discuss my patient's problems over the air.
Counselor, you may want to look at this. This is a statement by the child's mother we're talking about. He's given the state and the hospital and any physician permission. I'll tell you what the statement says to discuss.
I'm really not interested in it. I have no idea if that is that lady's signature. For all I know, you could have written that.
Sharon Johnson did authorize CNN to look into Carlton's medical history, and she insists that it was the doctors at Children's Hospital who persuaded her that Carlton should be placed in a shelter because he was going to die.
Everything was just negative, no positive, no hopes, nothing.
Like what? Go ahead, start straight through them.
You know, just like you could say something like, you can do this for him, you can do that for him, but it wasn't none of that. It was just all negative, just point blank negative.
No matter what you do, what's going to happen?
He was going to die. That was the bottom line.
You know Carlton's mother. Did she really, truly give him up of her own? Was that her own decision? Or is that the decision of others?
Mrs. Johnson was so misinformed, or she just was never given the facts on Carlton. She thought he was some sort of a monster. She thought he was blind, which he's not blind. Just that fact's demonstrated by him recognizing staff members.
2 weeks after CNN discussed Carlton Johnson's condition with Oklahoma officials, he was transferred to Children's Hospital, where he received an operation. But he won't be returning to the shelter. It was closed recently by state officials who charged the shelter owners in a civil suit with racketeering and fraud. McCormick says Carlton is not an isolated case. If anything, he says, Carlton is different only because he has somehow managed to beat the odds and has so far clung to life.
Is it normal for children to be sent over here from Children's Hospital without a shunt?
Some of the children do, some of the children don't.
What happens if they're not what happens if they're not shunted, as a rule?
They die
How long?
here. Depending on how strong the child is, and anywhere from days to months, and in some couple cases, years.
Carlton's one of the lucky ones, then, I take it.
One of the lucky ones, and that he's a survivor.
At least 24 other newborns with spina bifida didn't survive. They died at the shelter after a team of physicians from Oklahoma Children's Hospital recommended all medical treatment be withheld. In our next report, we'll examine how those infants were selected for non-treatment, a process which considers not only the child's medical potential, but also the parent's social and economic ability to care for a handicapped child. I'm Carlton Sherwood, CNN on special assignment.